Within a dark and menacing castle, the Demon Lord is getting ready to begin his conquest to take over the world, and to do that he summons his 4 demonic generals. Almandra the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Genome the Earth, and finally summons the most cynical and soulless of them all, an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denisuk started working for his company as an insignificant salaryman, but he was hope-filled and surely he would make his way up the promotion ladder at some point. However, while Denisuk was working hard for the sake of the company, his colleagues were all kissing up to their boss, so they ended up getting promotions while Denisuk ended up getting shipped off to another country to work on expansion. Upon arrival, Denisuk found that literally nothing was getting done because the site had no funding. He tried to convince his boss to approve more funding so they could buy the necessary equipment, but that would cost money, so his boss refused and yelled at him for wasting money. The locals couldn't care less about the job if they weren't going to be given the necessary tools, so they left, and Denisuk ended up having to do everything by himself. However, after seeing how hard Denisuk was working even though he was by himself, the locals were inspired and soon returned to help him out, but just when he finally got everything up and running, he had a call from his boss, and at first, he thought his hard work was finally being recognized, so he would be getting a much-needed bonus, but he was dead wrong. It didn't even throw him a pizza party. All he got in return for his hard work was even more work, as they decided to transfer him to another country for a separate expansion project. By this point then, Denisuk had begun to question his life choices because he realizes that he is wasting his life for a company that clearly doesn't care about him, but while he is distracted by his existential dread, he isn't paying attention to his surroundings, so he ends up getting run over by a motorbike. That kind of explains how he ended up here, but Denisuk thinks there must have been some kind of mistake because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. However, the Demon Lord calls him by name and tells him that he summons him here to become his new overseas manager. He's received extensive reports on all the hard work Denisuk had put in. He was assigned to an overseas branch of his company, learned the local language, and gained the trust of the locals to successfully run the new business. That is why the Demon Lord thinks Denisuk would be the perfect candidate for one of his 4 elite generals. Denisuk is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has ever actually acknowledged all the hard work he has been putting in, but he's a bit hesitant to accept the position of Demon General because that would technically mean he is betraying humanity. However, the Demon Lord mentions that the position will come with full workers' benefits, and all of a sudden, Denisuk doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. On top of that, the Demon Lord actually respects workers' rights, so he won't force Denisuk to accept the position if he doesn't want to. All this makes Denisuk really want to join. When he thinks about it, he remembers how he was always treated like trash back in his old company, and he doesn't think trash like him deserves to have such an important job, so he's about to reject the Demon Lord's offer, but before he does, the Demon Lord yells that he can't let the way he was treated at his former company dictate his worth. That place was run by obnoxious and selfish managers who only cared about themselves, so they would never pay attention to all the work Denisuk was putting in behind the scenes, but the Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he is well aware of how valuable Denisuk is as an employee. So will he choose to go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or will he stay here and help build the Demon Army? Denisuk is still a little hesitant to accept. All of a sudden, Almandra speaks up and says she objects to the idea of having a weak human in the Demon Army. Sylphid and Genome also object to the idea because they can't see how someone like him could possibly help the Demon Army. The Demon Lord understands why they would be skeptical, so he decides to put Denisuk through a test to show the others just how capable he really is. Denisuk starts freaking out and tries to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers, so he can't fight, but it's already too late because Almandra has decided to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers, so tells Denisuk to try and stop her deadly kick. However, before the kick could land, the Demon Lord steps in front of her and stops it. Almandra asks why the Demon Lord interrupted her, but he points out that she didn't wait for him to finish talking, so she ended up misunderstanding the situation. Look at poor Denisuk over there, he got so scared that he passed out from the shock. The others are surprised because Almandra wasn't even trying that hard, so for Denisuk to pass out from an attack like that, it makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The Demon Lord tells them that Denisuk really is just a regular human, and that makes them all object to the decision even more. The Demon Army is made up entirely of monsters, so if a human were to enter the power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, then he would get eaten alive almost instantly. The Demon Lord admits that there is a bit of friction between the factions of his army, but that's exactly why he needs Denisuk and his skill set. He doesn't expect him to have a sturdy body or incredible attack power, but rather what he expects from him is his resourcefulness. Just then Denisuk finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like what Almandra just tried to hit him with. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but the Demon Lord does intend to give Denisuk a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes, and so far, they've managed to reach an agreement with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe has been quite difficult, so Denisuk's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denisuk's superb negotiation skills, it should be simple enough to gain the Minotaur's trust and reach an amicable agreement, but Denisuk doesn't see anything simple about negotiating with Minotaur. However, the Demon Lord seriously believes he can pull it off, so he tells Denisuk to ask Almandra if he has any questions. Afterwards, Almandra leads Denisuk down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaur, but she thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denisuk can negotiate with Minotaur. Denisuk thinks she's right about him being useless, but the Demon Lord seems so sincere when he was talking about how much he needed Denisuk, and all Denisuk has ever wanted was to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations of him as much as he can. Just then Almandra tells Denisuk that they've arrived at the meeting room where the chief of the Minotaur tribe is staying, and Denisuk is a bit shocked by the sheer size of the room, but Almandra explains that it's perfectly normal since the Minotaur are big monsters, and as a fair warning, she tells him that Minotaur are known to be quite ferocious, so if he's not careful he's going to end up getting himself trampled to death. As Almandra opens the door, Denisuk has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Terius without instantly dying. Almandra feels bad for him, so she offers to help him out with the negotiations, and Denisuk is really thankful for the help, but then he sees Almandra start arguing with Terius, so he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. Almandra doesn't understand how Terius could be dissatisfied with everything they provided for him, and Terius says she doesn't understand what he's saying, so no headway is made on the pact, and Almandra leaves the meeting room. Almandra really doesn't understand why it's so hard for Terius to agree to the pact now when he was initially open to the idea. Just when they were about to finalize the agreement, he started yelling no over and over again. Almandra came back several times to see if he would agree to the pact again, but all he would ever say was no, so she couldn't understand what he wanted. Almandra can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denisuk to figure out, although she fully expects him to fail miserably. Denisuk starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess, but as he is walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender gets him a warm towel to calm him down, and Denisuk orders a drink while he sits down to think. He would like to work on the negotiations, but there's nothing he can do if the client refuses to negotiate. However, Denisuk then realizes that Terius might not actually be refusing to negotiate after all. He has experienced a situation like this before where a client was constantly telling him no, but when he looked into the client's eyes, he could tell what he really meant, and both sides were eventually able to reach an agreement. He now knows what he needs to do, so he finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do: negotiate. Meanwhile, Almandra is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Terius, and it didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denisuk will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today, but the Demon Lord still has faith in him, so he tells her to wait and see what Denisuk can accomplish. She doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denisuk, but she decides to go check up on him to see if he's alright, and when she does, she finds him in the process of stuffing several bags with hay. She asks him what he's doing, so he tells her that he intends to go have a good conversation with Terius. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since he's not willing to negotiate, but Denisuk still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Terius in the eyes and convey his emotions properly so the two of them can understand each other. Almandra notices that Denisuk looks a lot more confident than he did before, and without an ounce of fear this time, he walks into the meeting room to talk to Terius. The next morning Almandra comes into the meeting room to check if Denisuk is still alive, but when she looks inside, all she finds is a room full of hay, and neither Denisuk nor Terius inside. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then Denisuk comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she demands to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Denisuk tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord, but Almandra can't believe Denisuk managed to get him to agree in just one night. He explains that he simply took the time to get to know Terius well, and that made the negotiation process really easy. Almandra had thought Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept yelling no over and over, but in reality, Terius thought negotiations were going really well. Denisuk had experienced something like this before with an international client, and the client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him, so Denisuk thought the negotiation was going to end in failure, but to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, so he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius of Denisuk did a little research into Minotaur's culture, and found out that Minotaur always bring hay with them to act as their bed whenever they go to someone else's home, so all that time he was just trying to ask for his hay, and when Denisuk figured that out, there were no more problems with the negotiation. Now Almandra realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad, but Terius tells her it's all right since it was an honest mistake, and shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius is leaving, the Demon Lord comes up to Denisuk and Almandra and asks Almandra if she now understands why he wants to add Denisuk to their ranks. Almandra admits that Denisuk really is skilled when it comes to negotiating, and since he passed the Demon Lord's test, the Demon Lord officially makes him one of his 4 generals and puts a bracelet on his arm as a symbol of his position, and as a sign of her new respect for Denisuk, Almandra formally introduces herself to him, and says she looks forward to working with him as a new friend. Denisuk is finally starting to settle into his role as one of the demon generals, and it's nice that he's got his own office and a supportive boss, but this place is still going to take some getting used to. Since he is officially one of the demon generals now, he thinks he should formally introduce himself to the others, so he heads to Sylphid's room and knocks on the door. To his surprise, a girl answers the door and asks what he wants, so Denisuk tells her he's here to introduce himself to Sylphid. The girl then coldly tells him that she's Sylphid's assistant, and he's a very busy man, so she can't let Denisuk disturb him. Denisuk is disappointed, but he knew he was bound to face some pushback from the other demon generals, so he decides to just come back later to try again. However, before he could leave, Almandra comes running up to him because she has something important to say. The Demon Lord has another assignment for Denisuk, so Denisuk goes to meet with him immediately, and is informed of an agreement he is working on. For the demon army to grow in strength, he needs the support of all the surrounding demi-human tribes, and among all those tribes, the Ogre tribe is particularly influential. They possess a military force equal to that of the demon army, and as a result, it could become a threat to the demon empire if they were to become hostile. That is why the Demon Lord wants to have a merger negotiation with them so they can combine their forces, but the ogres are notoriously difficult to negotiate with, so nothing has been decided on yet. However, with Denisuk on the case, the Demon Lord is sure he will be able to reach an agreement with them, so he's granting him full authority on the matter. Denisuk is glad to see that the Demon Lord trusts him so much, but there's a real chance of him dying to the ogres if he goes alone, so Almandra volunteers to escort him to the ogre tribe. However, before that, Denisuk says he wants to go meet with Genome since she's in charge of the demi-human division of the demon army, and she might have some valuable information about the ogres. Almandra thinks Denisuk is right, but she absolutely refuses to go anywhere near Genome because she has generational beef with her, so instead, she says she'll go check on the carriages while Denisuk talks with Genome. Denisuk heads out into the training grounds where Genome is holding her daily training session, and he is impressed with what he sees because not only are Genome's men skilled in combat, but she also keeps their morale really high. Once training is done, she turns to address Denisuk and asks what he wants. Denisuk tells her he's here to ask if she knows anything about the ogre tribe, and she doesn't know much, but she tells Denisuk that their leader ogre is notoriously difficult to have a conversation with, so he's going to have a hard time negotiating with him. There's nothing she can really do to help him on this one, and she would never want to work on anything with Almandra anyway, so she asks Denisuk to get her out of here. Denisuk didn't even realize Almandra had been standing behind him, so he asks her why she's here, and why she's so angry. Almandra says she already finished checking the carriages, so she came to get Denisuk since she was worried about him, but she kept containing herself after seeing Genome, so the two start arguing, and Denisuk is starting to get worried about how much Almandra and Genome hate each other. Denisuk and Almandra eventually arrive at the Ogre Castle, but before they could enter, they are stopped at the gate and told to wait until Ogre gives them permission to enter. Almandra thinks it's ridiculous that they are being kept outside so long, but Denisuk has seen this before and knows Ogre is just trying to use this to throw them off so they won't be able to negotiate. That's why it's important that they keep their cool, but Almandra is on the verge of exploding in rage. Thankfully, before she gets act out, Ogre's assistant comes out and tells the two that they may now enter, but as they walk in, Denisuk notices how scruffy Ogre's armor look. Eventually, they make it to Ogre's throne room and come face to face with Ogre himself, but when Almandra tries to start the negotiations, he tells her to shut up. He doesn't care why they are here because he's never going to listen to what they have to say unless, of course, they came to surrender him. In which case he might hear them out, but only if they agree to kill their chief, the Demon Lord. Almandra can't believe the levels of bad words she just heard from Ogre's mouth, so she's about to crash out right now, but Denisuk grabs her hand and tells her to calm down because a violent crash out is exactly what Ogre is hoping for. He then turns to Ogre and in his most polite businessman voice, he says he and Almandra are going outside to have a brief chat. Outside, Almandra lets out all her rage and curses the very existence of Ogre for daring to say such a thing. She's fully prepared to go back in there and tear Ogre limb from limb, but Denisuk calms her down and tells her they can't react to his provocation because that's exactly what he wants. He intentionally saying things to get them angry in hopes that they cause a scene so negotiations break down. That way he can avoid directly rejecting the negotiation and blame its failure on the two of them. Now that she knows what Ogre was trying to do, Almandra decides to calm herself down, but she's still really frustrated by the fact that Ogre insulted the Demon Lord. To be honest, Denisuk is just as angry, but acting on that anger would only hurt their chances of success here, so they have to be careful about how they respond. With that said though, Ogre isn't willing to negotiate, so there's not much they can do at this point. Just then the girl from before shows up and she introduces herself as Ogre's daughter Orliula. She knows this may come off as rude, but she has a request to make, so she asks for Denisuk and Almandra's help in taking the throne from her father. She leads Denisuk and Almandra to an empty room and explains that this is the food storage, and as they can see it has no food. The ogre is known for its strength and influence among the demihumans, but recently, they've run into financial trouble and has gotten so bad that a lot of their people are struggling to find food to eat. Denisuk then assumes something like this was going on because when they came in, he saw the terrible state of the ogre's equipment along with the cold and empty feeling he got from the castle itself. This kind of situation usually occurs when large companies begin to decline. They make it seem like everything's going well, but on the inside, they are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. That's exactly what's going on with the ogre tribe, and Orliula believes that the only way to rebuild it is to rely on the demon army's help. However, her father refuses to listen to her, and on top of that, he is currently sick. They've been trying to keep this fact hidden, which is why they had Almandra and Denisuk outside while they prepared him for the meeting, but his condition just keeps getting worse and soon, he is going to pass away. If Ogre were to die with things as they are now, it would be the end of their tribe, so she pleads with Denisuk to help her. Denisuk says he understands her concerns, but he also scolds her for sharing such vital information. As the daughter of the chief, she needs to be more careful about the people she trusts. When Orliula can tell that Denisuk is a good person, she's pretty confident in her ability to discern the nature of people, which is why she told him about the situation, and now she asks Denisuk to help her save the ogre tribe by marrying her. After hearing this, Denisuk freaks out and Almandra begins burning with rage, but Orliula is serious about her proposal. All the ogres in her tribe are as dumb as rocks, so the only way for Orliula to ensure the prosperity of the demon army is for a smart guy like Denisuk to marry her and become the new chief. Denisuk tries to talk Orliula out of making any rash decisions, but Orliula is convinced that this is the only way to save the ogre tribe, so she's willing to make their marriage official immediately, but Almandra doesn't let that happen. Later that night, Denisuk is sitting in his office and wondering how he's going to get himself out of this mess because Ogre refuses to negotiate with him and Orliula wants to marry him. He can afford to fail on his second assignment for the Demon Lord, so he decides to go to the bar in his head so he can clear his thoughts. However, this time he's not alone because Denisuk's imaginary version of Almandra is sitting at the table next to him arguing with the bartender about which is cooler, gorillas or lions. Realistically, a gorilla is mopping the floor with a lion any day of the week, but Almandra counters saying lions are cooler because a group of lions is called a pride. As soon as Denisuk hears this, he snaps out of his trance, and he now has a foolproof idea of how to handle this. First thing the next morning, Denisuk calls Almandra outside and he apologizes for waking her up so early, but he needs her help so they can go do some negotiating, but for Denisuk's plan to work they need to go somewhere else first, and if all goes well then Ogre is the one who will be begging for a negotiation meeting. 1 week later, Denisuk and Almandra are called into the chief's throne room just like Denisuk had planned, and Ogre looks pretty mad. He just found out that all the surrounding tribes formed an alliance with the demon army over the past week, and he wants an explanation. A week ago, Denisuk told Almandra about his plan to recruit the smaller tribes first instead of trying to convince Ogre. It shouldn't be too hard because just like the Ogre tribe, the other tribes are struggling with the food shortage, so they can be swayed by the promise of support. Almandra understood Denisuk's plan, but she didn't expect it to work so well by forcing Ogre into negotiations. Denisuk's strategy was based on something he had to do when he was selling a product back on Earth. If he tried to approach a big company directly, he would usually be rejected, so he decided to first market to all the smaller companies and sell them his product, and eventually the big company would be forced to contact him and ask for the product as well, so they wouldn't be left behind. Similarly, if all the surrounding demihumans joined the demon army, then the prideful chief wouldn't let that go without a response. For now, Denisuk plays dumb and acts like he simply offered to form an alliance with the smaller groups because they were struggling to survive and needed the support of the demon army, but that makes Ogre even angrier since he never agreed to any negotiations. Everything is going according to plan because now that Ogre has lost his cool, he is much more susceptible to Denisuk's negotiation tactics. Denisuk then starts explaining that the alliances weren't formed by him alone because he had help from Orliulu. Ogre can't believe that his own daughter would betray him like this, but she tells him that it was necessary for the sake of their Ogre tribe. The only way out of their current situation is to rely on the demon army's aid, and as much as he may not want to admit it, times have changed. He's grown old, is currently sick, so they need to join the demon army if they are going to survive. Just then Denisuk chimes in and offers an alternative to Ogre. Instead of joining the demon army, they could form an equal partnership. To be honest, Denisuk just made that thing up because he hasn't changed anything about the deal, but if he says it's an equal partnership, then the proud Ogre chief is bound to be more willing to accept. As expected, Ogre doesn't seem opposed to the idea, but he asks them to give him some time to think it over. A couple of days later, Almandra comes running into Denisuk's office to tell him the good news. She tells Denisuk that Ogre has just agreed to the alliance with the demon army, and that's great news, but right now, Denisuk has more important things to worry about. The demon lord told him to pick out an assistant for himself, so he spent the past few days looking through applications to find the right person. Honestly, he wishes he could just pick Almandra since she's so reliable, and Almandra misunderstands this to be Denisuk's way of proposing, so she gets a little embarrassed. Just then there's another knock at the door, so Denisuk goes to check who it is and finds Orliulu there. She tells him she's here to act as a representative from the Ogre tribe for their alliance with the demon army, and she's incredibly grateful to him for his help since her father has become a lot more diplomatic ever since their encounter. She says she's willing to do anything to show her gratitude, and since she said anything, Denisuk asks her if she would like to become his personal assistant. Orliulu is more than happy to take the job, but Almandra is jealous, so she refuses to look Denisuk in the eye and reminds herself that they are rivals, so she can't be friends with him. Denisuk has no idea why she suddenly started acting so strange, but that aside, this has been a good month for him since the demon army has grown quite a bit, but whenever there's growth, there's also increased risk, so everyone needs to keep their guard up. A couple of days passed and Denisuk is working in his office as usual when Orliulu comes in and tells him she has reached an agreement with the Bearman tribe like he asked her to, so as long as he meets their conditions, they will support the demon army. Denisuk is glad to hear that thing went well with the Bearman tribe, but there's something else Orliulu wants to tell him. She'd heard that Denisuk is going to be rewarded for all the hard work he has been putting in, and the award ceremony is going to be held soon, so she'll tell him about it after his lunch break is over. Denisuk has no idea what he's going to be awarded, but with how the demon lord treats him, he can be sure that it will be better than a pizza party. Just then Almandra comes into Denisuk's office with some lunch for them to share as they always do, but while Denisuk loves eating with Almandra, he hates the fact that the only food available in the demon army is bland porridge. He understands that there are limitations to the logistics of feeding an entire army, but he still wishes he could at least have some meat to go with the porridge. Almandra hears Denisuk's complaining and she has the perfect solution, so if Denisuk wants meat, then they're going to go get it from the source. Denisuk really doesn't like the idea of going hunting just so he can eat some meat, but that's not the only reason old Almandra brought him out here. She actually received a request from the demi-human tribes living nearby asking her to exterminate a magical beast that has been attacking them in this forest. So far, 5 orcs have been killed by this thing and Denisuk thinks that's terrible, but Almandra sees it differently. It's perfectly natural for the weak to be eaten by the strong, and normally it would be Orc tribe's job to defend themselves from any threats like this, but the beast in question is far too strong for them to defeat, and Almandra can't let the Orc tribe be slaughtered, so she agreed to handle it for them. Speaking of which, Almandra notices some mushrooms growing under a tree, and from what she was told, all the orcs got eaten were attacked while picking these mushrooms since they are a valuable ingredient. Therefore, the magical beast must be camping somewhere around here. If they wait long enough, then it's sure to attack. Evidently, they didn't have to wait long since the boar shows up behind them almost immediately, so Almandra tells Denisuk to run for cover while she handles this. She jumps into the air and heel kicks the boar's face into the ground, but in retaliation the boar starts using its horns to throw rocks at Almandra, and although she can easily dodge them, Denisuk can't, so he's freaking out. The boar starts smashing through trees and is heading straight for Denisuk, but before he could get hurt, Almandra lands a clean punch to the boar's stomach. From what he can see, it's clear to Denisuk that Almandra is strong, but so far none of her strikes have been fatal. It wouldn't matter if this was just a regular fight, but right now their goal is to hunt this thing, so what she's lacking is killing power. The boar has sharp tusks to attack with, so a single mistake on Almandra's end would be fatal. However, her blows only cause blunt force trauma, so she is going to end this quickly. Then Denisuk thinks she needs a weapon. He was right about one man's blows not being strong enough to kill this thing as she is now, but she has been holding back so far. She doesn't like using her true power because it takes a long time to recover from the effects, but she won't be able to kill this thing otherwise. The boar tries charging at her again, but this time Almandra is able to stop it with one hand. She could easily kill it with a single punch right now, but that might ruin its meat, so instead, she picks it up and snaps its neck. Now that the boar is dead, Almandra tells Denisuk they can eat meat now, but honestly Denisuk has lost his appetite. They drag the boar's body to the orc village so they can show the villagers that the boar has been dealt with, and all the villagers are really grateful for what Almandra did, as well as impressed that she was able to take it down on her own. Almandra is really enjoying all this praise, but that aside, it's rare to get so much meat, so Almandra invites the entire village to share the boar with her. The villagers are all excited, but Denisuk can't believe they are actually okay with eating boar meat when that thing was one evolution cycle away from being their next-door neighbor. However, he's even more surprised when he hears Almandra say she's going to cook the meat. He asks her if she's really serious about cooking, so Almandra offers to give him a taste of her homemade delicacy. Denisuk is actually getting excited since Almandra is making it sound so good, but when he asks her how she plans to cook, she just chucks a fireball at it. The result is this lump of charred flesh, and we can tell by the look on Denisuk's face that this meat is straight trash. Almandra tells him to just give it a try because it's better than it looks, but Denisuk takes a bite, and it tastes just as bad as it looks. This meat tastes like someone poured hot tar in his mouth, and he'd honestly rather starve than have to suffer through another bite of this. Almandra tells him it's rude to insult someone's cooking like that, but Denisuk tells her it's rude to call what she just did cooking. He has been enduring the culture shock of living in a new world so far, but this is too much for him to handle, so he asked if everyone can let him handle the cooking from now on. Once Denisuk is done cooking the meat, Almandra takes one bite and realizes this actually tastes amazing, so she asks Denisuk what he did. He explains that first he soaked the pork in water to get all the blood out, and then he slow roasted it over a fire to remove all the excess fat in there, and finally adding it to a soup helps get rid of any bad smells. He offers to teach the villagers if they want to learn, and the villagers are glad that one of the demon generals is being so thoughtful, but Almandra doesn't think it's necessary for someone as high-ranking as Denisuk to spend time teaching villagers how to cook. Denisuk tells her she's wrong because his job is to improve the demon army, and a big step in the development of any civilization is their culinary advancement. It's natural for people who eat meat often to figure out different ways to improve the taste, but because meat is so rare here, no one can afford to experiment with it. In other words, this country is poor and lacking in knowledge. It sounds harsh when he puts it that way, but Almandra can argue since he's correct. This country is mostly barren, and compared to the surrounding nations, it is pretty weak, but that's exactly why they have to work hard to make a change as part of the Big Four. Since they are done here, Almandra suggests that they should return to the castle, but Denisuk doesn't think that's a good idea since it's already dark out. However, Almandra tells him it won't be a problem since she can illuminate their path with this fireball. She is really proud of her magic prowess since it's an ability unique to demons, and Denisuk is quite impressed. It also makes sense why demihumans who can't use magic train day in and out to become effective fighters, while demons like Almandra can rely solely on their magic, but he thinks Almandra could stand to improve her combat techniques a little. For instance, Even though her attack power rises dramatically when she uses her true power to transform her body, it takes a while for her body to recover afterwards, so he suggests that she should bring a weapon with her to help with combat next time. He also suggests that she should wear armor that covers more of her body, but after he says this, Almandra stops dead in her tracks and puts out her light. She understands that Denisuk may be right, but his focus on efficiency is insulting to her, so she's way too mad to be around him right now. She dishes Denisuk in the forest, and Denisuk is left wondering why she got so mad, but before that he's almost guaranteed to get eaten if he stays out in this forest, so he runs back to the orc village for safety. The next morning Denisuk meets with the Demon Lord to give a report on the mission, and the Demon Lord congratulates him on his success, but he heard that Almandra returned last night, while Denisuk only arrived this morning while being escorted by the orcs, so he wants to know if something bad happened between him and Almandra. Denisuk breaks down, and says he's not worthy of being one of the demon army's generals. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down, and explain what happened, so Denisuk tells him everything. The Demon Lord can tell that Denisuk inadvertently offended Almandra, but what's important now is that they make amends for the sake of the demon army, so he officially orders Denisuk to find a way to make up with Almandra, but that's easier said than done. He recalls how proud Almandra was when she said that demons are the only ones who can use magic, but there has to be more to it than that, so he starts reading a demon history book to see if he can figure something out. He soon finds a chapter talking about how a ton physique is essential for a demon's magic power, which is why demons take great pride in their bodies and often wear extremely revealing clothes. Denisuk now understands why Old got so upset, because when he told her that it would be more efficient to wear armor that covers her body more, he was basically rejecting her pride as a demon, but even if he knows the reason she got mad, he has no idea how he's going to repair their relationship. Meanwhile, over in the castle, Orlula has just finished chopping up the firewood for the day, and she's about to go handle her next task, but she is shocked to see a menacing wall of death in front of her. Almandra is really upset about what happened with Denisuk, so when she sees Orlulu, she runs to her crying that Denisuk hates her and refuses to praise her body. Orlulu has no idea what's going on at first, but after Almandra explains what happened, she realizes where the misunderstanding might have come from. She tells Almandra that as a human, Denisuk's values are a lot different from theirs. In particular, Orlulu knows that Denisuk doesn't think exposing your body is a good thing, but Almandra can't believe it since she's been exposing her body to him for weeks, and he never complained about it. Orlulu explains that Denisuk probably just thought Almandra was some kind of exhibitionist, so he never questioned it. Upon hearing this, Almandra suddenly realizes that if Denisuk was uncomfortable with her exposed body, then all those gestures of bodily affection she had shown him probably did come off as some sort of deviant behavior. She's so embarrassed and angry at herself for ditching Denisuk in the forest as she starts smashing her face into the floor, but Orlula begs her to stop because the floor can't take much more of this. Almandra asks Orlula for advice on what she should do now since she got mad at Denisuk for no reason, so Orlula tells her about a discussion she had with him when she first became his assistant. He told Orlula that he wanted her to stay true to her desires no matter what, because he wanted her to feel free to talk about any troubles she had so they could come to a solution together. Regardless of any misunderstandings, Orlulu is sure Almandra can make up with Denisuk as long as they talk it out. Denisuk and Almandra eventually find each other in the castle stairwell, and they both got something really important to say, so Almandra tells Denisuk that she's not a hoe, she just wanted him to compliment her body, while at the same time Denisuk tells her that he thinks her body is hot. They both take a moment to process what the other said, and since it seems like they are both on the same page, Denisuk apologizes Almandra. He didn't know much about demons and hadn't realized that what he said would be insulting to her. Almandra accepts his apology, and also apologizes to Denisuk because it wasn't his fault that he didn't know about demon culture, and even if she was mad, she shouldn't have left him in the middle of the forest alone. Denisuk did nearly die because of that, so Almandra is really guilty, but since he ended up being okay, Denisuk says he forgives her. He's glad they were able to make up, and now that they've gotten the chance to learn a little about one another, Denisuk thinks they can become great partners. Although he still doesn't realize that Denisuk interprets the word partner as a marriage proposal. Later, the Demon Lord gathers all his subordinates because he has a special announcement to make. After forming alliances with the various tribes, his demon army has grown far stronger than it used to be, and this is all thanks to the diligent work of his newest general Denisuk, so in light of his achievements, the Demon Lord is presenting him with this magic stone. Denisuk feels greatly honored to receive such a valuable stone, but he cannot accept it because he didn't do the work alone. None of this would have been possible if he didn't have Almandra by his side, so he walks up to her, gets down on one knee, and asks Almandra to accept the stone with him. Almandra is happy, but she freaks out that Denisuk is doing this in public with so many people watching. He's not aware of this, but presenting a magic stone to a girl is quite literally the definition of a marriage proposal in this world, so he just proposed to her in front of all the demon army leaders, and the only reason she didn't immediately accept is because she's embarrassed with everyone around. A couple of days later, Denisuk is called into a meeting with the Demon Lord, and he's terrified because he thinks he did something wrong, so as a preemptive measure he begins apologizing and begs to keep his job. The Demon Lord is surprised by Denisuk's reaction and tells him he isn't in any kind of trouble. They literally held an award ceremony for him the other day because of how good he is at his job. With that said, the Demon Lord has something he wants to discuss with him. He asks Denisuk what he thinks of the current relationship between the demi-humans and the demons of the demon army. From what Denisuk has seen firsthand, it looks like the demi-humans feel inferior to the demons, since only demons are capable of using magic, and that's exactly what the Demon Lord has been trying to address, so he asks Anus to find a way to make it so everyone can use magic, because that way the demi-humans will be able to stand next to the demons as equals. Denisuk thinks it's a good plan, but there's one major problem with it, since Denisuk can't use magic in the first place, so how is he supposed to figure out a way to allow everyone to use it? The Demon Lord realizes that it's a daunting task, but that's why he gifted Denisuk a magic stone, and he gives Denisuk full authority to decide how he will use it to accomplish his mission. However, he won't be able to do it on his own, so the Demon Lord assigned a magic specialist to help. The specialist is Sylphid, and the Demon Lord assures Denisuk Sylphid is really good when it comes to magic, but Denisuk still needs to be a bit careful because Sylphid is a major pain in the ass to deal with. Denisuk says he understands and leaves the Demon Lord's throne room to go find Sylphid, and as he does this, Almandra is watching him from behind the railing. She's been spying on Denisuk any chance she gets for the past few days, partially because she's interested in finding out how his work is going, but also because she's still giddy with excitement from Denisuk's marriage proposal a few days ago. Denisuk soon arrives at Sylphid's room, so he knocks at the door, but the person who answers is Belinda, and she tells him that Sylphid isn't here right now, so he's going to have to come back later. She then tries to close the door on him, but Denisuk sticks his foot in the door and insists on coming in anyway. Almandra saw all this happen, and she's starting to get upset that Denisuk would flirt with another woman after he already proposed her. Meanwhile, inside Sylphid's room, Belinda tries convincing Denisuk to leave since Sylphid isn't here, but he's not that story since he knows Belinda is really Sylphid. Belinda tries to deny it, but Denisuk has two good reasons to believe that she's lying. First, he has memorized the list of all demon army officials, and there's no one named Belinda on peril, and secondly, the Demon Lord already snitched on her and told Denisuk that she likes to disguise herself to get out of work. Sylphid has clearly been caught, so she admits that Denisuk is right about her, but he still doesn't understand why she would pretend to be her own assistant. Sylphid simply explains that if everyone knew her real identity, then they'd start giving her tons of work to do, and she hates work. Be that as it may, Denisuk has some work he needs to discuss with her, so he asks Sylphid if she can spare some time to talk about magic tools with him. However, Sylphid flat out refuses to do anything that requires effort, even if it's under direct orders from the Demon Lord. Besides, she already made something like that in the past, so she has no reason to recreate it now. Denisuk has no idea that Sylphid had tried making magic tools in the past, and since he seems pretty interested, she decides to let him to see her invention. She pulls out an object and informs Denisuk that it is made of a mineral base that allows magic to move through it easily with pieces of magic stone layered on top of it. With this setup, it can be used to cast all types of magic, and that sounds exactly like what Denisuk is looking for, so he asks Sylphid if he can have permission to mass produce it. Sylphid tells him he's free to do what he wants, but this prototype costs 50 million to make, so he's going to need one hell of a financial scheme to fund mass production. After all, the device requires high-level magic stones to be used in its construction, so of course it would be costly to make. Denisuk is still shocked after learning how expensive these things are, and he now understands why Sylphid never put these into production, but he simply can't let himself give up yet, so he asks her if it would be possible to reduce the number of spells the device can cast. From what Sylphid told him, the device requires high-level magic stones to allow it to cast several different types of magic, so he suggests limiting it to a single spell. Sylphid is intrigued because she had never thought of it that way, and after a little thinking, she confirms that limiting the device to one spell would significantly reduce the cost, since low-level magic stones could be used in production instead. She's really impressed that Denisuk was able to come up with that idea in such a short amount of time, and it just so happens that he has a magic stone on hand, so he asks Sylphid if this will work. Sylphid is starting to get invested in this idea, and since they already have all the necessary materials, she's ready to be in work right away, but she needs an assistant to help, so she drags Denisuk down into her basement, and she doesn't plan on letting him sleep all tonight. Meanwhile, outside Suit's room, Almandra is starting to get suspicious and wonders what Denisuk could be doing in Sylphid's office with a woman so late at night. The next morning, we see Denisuk sitting on the basement floor barely conscious due to a lack of sleep. Sylphid is equally sleep-deprived, but she's also really excited because she managed to completely redesign her magic tool to cast a single spell. Now this thing can be mass-produced for a fraction of the cost of the old model, and it's all thanks to her genius. However, before they can begin mass production, they still need to test it, so she tells Denisuk that he's going to be the test subject. Denisuk pleads with her to at least give him some time to rest since he's on the verge of collapse, so Sylphid allows him to leave, but she says she's only giving him a 1-hour break before he comes back so they can start testing this thing. As Denisuk heads back to the front door, he's about to open it, but before he could do anything, Almandra barges in and demands to know what Denisuk has been doing all night. Almandra's actions led to Denisuk getting knocked out, so she gets on her knees and tries to shake him until he wakes up, but all the shaking is just making him dizzy. Just then Sylphid comes out of the basement, and she's wearing her usual outfit, so Almandra won't realize that she was the woman from before. Almandra is starting to question if what she saw earlier was right, but all of a sudden Almandra's assistant Lilim and Oryalu enter the room as well because there's a huge emergency. A flock of Asiato birds has just attacked a few villages, and if nothing is done soon, then those villages will be destroyed. Asiato birds are large flightless birds that are known for their vicious nature, and they are so much of a threat that the Demon Lord has ordered that they do whatever it takes to drive those birds away. That's why Lilim came looking for Almandra, since she's the only person capable of dealing with such a large flock. As she's being dragged away, Almandra expresses her disappointment since she wants to spend time with Denisuk, but Sylphid sees this as the perfect opportunity to test out the new magic device, so she intends to bring Denisuk out to the battlefield. Once they are outside, Denisuk tells the locals to stand back a bit since what they are about to do might be dangerous. Sylphid sets the magic stone to cast a simple fire magic spell and hands it over to Denisuk so he can give it a try. Before that, Denisuk asks her if this thing has any safety features, but Sylphid assures him that even if it explodes, Denisuk will only lose an arm, but that doesn't make him feel any better. He decides to test out anyway despite the risk, so as the flock of Asiato of birds approaches, Sylphid instructs him to start channeling power from the device. It makes a strange sound when Denisuk powers it up, but Sylphid tells him that's just how it operates. Now she wants Denisuk to imagine that the device is an extension of his own body, and let the energy flow until it accumulates in his right hand. Denisuk follows her instructions, and before long, he has formed a fireball in his hand. Denisuk is amazed that he was actually able to use magic, and since the first phase was a success, Sylphid tells him to begin attacking the birds. Denisuk isn't sure if this will work while he throws a fireball at one of the birds anyway, and it burns it. Sylphid encourages him to keep going until he has taken care of all the birds, so Denisuk continuously chucks fireball after fireball, and for the first time since he came to this world, he feels like he's really strong enough to win a fight. However, that feeling of power is short-lived because in the next moment the magic device burns out, so we can no longer use magic. One of the birds closes in on Denisuk and is about to kill him, but before that could happen, Sylphid raises a barrier around him. Denisuk tries using the device again, but this time it just seems to be slowly attracting the birds instead of allowing Denisuk to use magic. Sylphid takes care of the birds that were coming after Denisuk, and then she asks him why he isn't using the device to cast magic anymore, so he shows her the crystal, and it's clearly been overloaded. It looks like low-level magic crystal aren't enough to maintain the device after all, so this experiment is a failure. For now, they did manage to drive the birds away, so the villagers celebrate by making a pot of stew with the bird meat. While Denisuk is getting a bowl of stew, Sylphid is over by the tree playing with one of the demi-human children. Denisuk comes over and expresses his surprise because he was under the impression that all demi-humans were strong, but he had no idea that some of them were this weak. Sylphid agrees with him, but even though they are weak, demi-humans like them are still very kind, and it reminds her a bit of her past. Sylphid was born into a merchant family of elves, but things went wrong, and she ended up getting kicked out. She then lived as a wanderer for a while until she was welcomed into a village of demi-humans. The demi-humans were extremely kind to her, but none of them could use magic, and because of that, they lived in poverty. Sylphid wanted to help them, so she set out to invent a device that would allow them to use magic, but along the way, she got distracted and forgot her original reason for all of this. She turns to Denisuk and tells him that her goal as a researcher is to help people, so they need to make this project a success no matter what, especially since more of those birds are bound to attack this village again. Denisuk thinks about it for a minute, and he comes up with a great idea, so he asks Sylphid if she can make more of those magic devices by tomorrow morning. Since she already created the designs, it shouldn't take long to make more, but she won't be able to make any improvements to the design without her tools. Denisuk tells her she doesn't need to make any improvements since what he's trying to do will work with the current design. The next morning, Denisuk and Sylphid head out to confront the flock of birds charging towards the village, and before the birds could make it all the way here, Denisuk activates the magic devices that he had stuck in the ground ahead of time. The sound from all the devices powering on at the same time is so disturbing to the birds that they all change their minds about attacking the village and run away, and best of all, since no actual spells were ever cast, the magic stones in the device will last for a very long time, meaning they can keep the remote villages safe while also saving on costs. The Demon Lord is greatly pleased with the innovation the two of them achieved, so he commends them both and asks Sylphid to begin mass production of the magic devices so they can be distributed to all the villages that need them. A little while later, Denisuk meets up with Sylphid to thank her for all her help because he never could have achieved this result on his own. Similarly, Sylphid thanks Denisuk for his help because he got her excited about her research again, and reminded her that she's doing this to help people. She's truly grateful, so she tells him that if he ever needs help with something he can come ask her, and before she leaves, she gives him a magic device she made it especially for him. The other ones could only handle 10 spells at max, but this one can handle at least 30, so it should help him if he ever finds himself in danger. Denisuk then returns to his office and he is more motivated than ever to get his paperwork done, but before he could even start, he gets knocked out when Almandra comes barging in. She just heard about the whole research assignment with Sylphid and she wanted to apologize to him for thinking he was flirting with another woman even though he proposed to her, but then she sees him unconscious on the floor, so she rushes to his side to see if he's okay.